I never thought a single envelope could change how I remember my entire life. It was tucked inside a drawer I don't open very often. The kind of drawer you keep things in not because you need them, but because you don't know where else to put them. Old manuals for appliances I no longer own. A pair of reading glasses with one arm bent slightly out of shape. Birthday cards from people who stopped writing years ago. I wasn't looking for anything important. I was just trying to pass time in that quiet part of the afternoon when the house feels too still and the day hasn't decided what it's going to become yet. That's when I saw it. An envelope. Yellowed at the edges. My name written on the front in a handwriting I recognized immediately, even before my mind caught up with my eyes. The ink had faded, but the shape of the letters hadn't. Slanted slightly to the right. Careful. Familiar. I sat down at the table before opening it. Not because I felt dizzy. Because something inside me slowed everything down, as if my body knew before I did that this wasn't just paper. I held it there for a while. Longer than necessary. Long enough to notice how quiet the room was. Long enough to hear the clock in the other room ticking in a way that felt louder than usual. I remember thinking, I forgot this existed. And right behind that thought came another one, softer and harder to admit. I think I forgot on purpose. The envelope was heavier than I expected. Not in weight. In meaning. The kind of heaviness you feel in your chest before a memory arrives fully formed. I ran my thumb along the edge, feeling the roughness where time had done its work. It had never been opened. Or maybe it had, once, and carefully sealed again. I couldn't remember. That should have told me something. When I finally slid my finger under the flap, it made a small tearing sound. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to mark the moment as irreversible. I took the letter out slowly. The paper was thin. Fragile. Like it had been waiting a long time for air. I didn't read it right away. I looked at the date first. So many years ago. I had to do the math in my head. Count backward. Place myself in that version of my life. The one who still thought there was time. The one who believed certain conversations could always happen later. I folded the letter once, then unfolded it again. My hands weren't shaking, but they didn't feel steady either. I wondered, briefly, if I should stop. Put it back. Pretend I never found it. That was an old habit. But I was tired of pretending. So I began to read. It wasn't long. Not really. Just a few pages. No grand declarations. No dramatic language. Just words written by someone who was trying to say something important without knowing how. They wrote about ordinary things first. How the house felt empty after I left. How quiet the evenings had become. How they still caught themselves listening for my footsteps even though they knew better. Then the words shifted. They wrote about things left unsaid. About misunderstandings that grew too large because neither of us wanted to be the first to name them. About pride disguised as patience. About waiting too long for the right moment, only to realize later that the moment had passed. I had to stop reading halfway through. Not because it was too much. Because it was too familiar. I sat there staring at the table, the letter resting open in front of me, my eyes fixed on a small stain near the edge of the wood. I've owned that table for years. I know every mark on it. That stain came from a coffee cup I set down without thinking one morning when I was rushing out the door. I remembered that morning. I remembered who I was rushing to see. The memory arrived without permission, as they always do. Clearer than I expected. Sharper. Like time hadn't softened it at all. I wondered how many moments like that were hidden inside the rest of the letter. I wondered how many I'd been carrying without knowing it. When I went back to reading, my pace was slower. More careful. As if I could stretch the space between sentences and protect myself from what came next. They wrote about regret. Not in a dramatic way. Not begging. Just naming it quietly, the way someone does when they've accepted it as part of their life. They wrote about wishing they'd spoken sooner. Wishing they'd asked instead of assuming. Wishing they'd been braver in smaller ways, not grand ones. That part stayed with me. Being brave in small ways. I realized how often I'd confused silence with strength. How many times I told myself that letting things go made me the bigger person, when really it just made me distant. The letter didn't accuse me of anything. That somehow made it worse. There was a line near the end that I read 3 times before it settled. I don't know if you'll ever read this. But if you do, I hope you know I loved you in the only way I knew how at the time. I folded the letter then. Carefully. Like it might tear if I wasn't gentle enough. I pressed it flat with my palm and closed my eyes. The room felt different. Not heavier. Just fuller. I thought about the person I had been when this was written. How certain I felt about my reasons. How convinced I was that walking away was the mature thing to do. That distance would make things clearer. Easier. It did make things quieter. I mistook that for peace. I thought about all the years that followed. The life that filled and around that decision. New routines. New responsibilities. New relationships that never quite reached the same depth, but were comfortable enough not to question. I built something stable out of avoidance. I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time. There's a strange kind of regret that doesn't scream. It doesn't announce itself when you're young. It waits. It settles into the corners of your life. It shows up later, when you finally slow down enough to notice what's missing. This wasn't regret for something dramatic I did wrong. It was regret for what I didn't do at all. I tried to remember why I never opened the letter back then. I know it arrived. I remember seeing the envelope. I remember recognizing the handwriting even then. I must have put it in that drawer almost immediately. I told myself I wasn't ready. I told myself it was better to let things stay as they were. What I didn't tell myself was the truth. I was afraid that reading it would ask something of me. And I wasn't sure I wanted to give it. As I sat there, older now, with the letter finally open, I wondered what would have happened if I'd read it when it arrived. Would I have called? Would I have written back? Would it have changed anything? That question doesn't have an answer. Time doesn't work that way. All it gives you is the awareness that there were other paths. And the quiet understanding that you didn't take them. I looked around the house. The same walls. The same furniture. Everything carefully arranged. Everything in its place. I realized how much of my life had been built around keeping things orderly. Predictable. Safe. The letter didn't belong to that order. It belonged to a version of me who still believed in unfinished conversations. I thought about finding their number. About writing back, even now. The thought passed through me gently, without urgency. I knew enough, by then, not to mistake longing for possibility. Some doors don't close loudly. They just remain unopened until it's too late to walk through them. I placed the letter back into the envelope when I was done. Not because I wanted to hide it again, but because I wanted to keep it intact. Whole. The way it had waited all those years. I didn't put it back in the drawer. I set it on the table instead, where I could see it. That evening, as the light faded and the house grew quieter, I found myself thinking about all the things we leave unsaid because we assume there will be time. About how easily we convince ourselves that clarity will arrive on its own, without discomfort, without risk. It rarely does. Clarity usually arrives when there's nothing left to do with it. I don't know what I'll do with the letter now. Maybe nothing. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it wasn't meant to change the future, only to change the way I understand the past. It has already done that. I no longer remember my life as a series of sensible decisions. I remember it as a collection of moments where I chose certainty over honesty. I don't say that with bitterness. Just recognition. Some nights, I take the letter out again. I don't reread it every time. Sometimes I just hold it. Feel the paper between my fingers. Let it remind me that I was once important enough to someone for them to write all of this down. That matters more than I expected it to. There are relationships that end loudly. With words and reasons and finality. And then there are the ones that end quietly. With an envelope left unopened. With a conversation postponed. With love that never finds the right moment to speak. Those are the ones that stay with you. Not as pain, but as presence. I don't know if things would have been better if I'd read the letter sooner. I only know that reading it now has changed the shape of my memories. It has softened some of them. Sharpened others. It has reminded me that silence is a choice, even when it feels like the safest one. The house is quiet again now. The clock still ticks. The table still bears its old stains. The letter rests where I left it. Nothing looks different. But something is. And sometimes, late at night, I find myself wondering how many other envelopes are still closed in people's lives. And what they might feel, years from now, if they finally find the courage to open them.